Welcome, and thank you for joining us at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston for our online services. I'm Carol Burris, the church's Director of Religious Community. Today, our senior minister, the Reverend Dr. Colin Bossen, is sharing a sermon entitled Humanism and a Just World. In it, he reflects on what humanism teaches us about the limits and possibilities of justice. Also this morning, we honor our high school seniors as they graduate and move on to the next steps of their lives. Our seniors this year are Quincy Thibodeau, Savannah Hexamer White, Declan Brown, and Bello Thompson. Immediately after the benediction, please stay to hear more about each of these youth and their plans for the future. For those of you who are new to our congregation, or our online services, I invite you to continue watching after we honor our seniors to hear more about the living tradition that is Unitarian Universalism. We now invite you to hear our call to worship.
Our call to worship this morning comes from Angela Herrera. Don't leave your broken heart at the door. Bring it to the altar of life. Don't leave your anger behind. It has high standards and the world needs vision. Bring them with you, and your joy and your passion. Bring your loving and your courage and your conviction. Bring your need for healing and your power to heal. There is work to do, and you have all you need to do it. Hearing these words, come, friends, let us worship together.
Celebremos compartiendo nuestras vidas, encendiendo esta luz. Now let us sing to the power of the faith. Now let us sing to the power of the faith. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing to the power of the faith. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of the hope within. Now let us sing to the power of the love within. Now let us sing to the power of the love within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of the love within. Now let us sing to the power of the joy within. Now let us sing to the power of the joy within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of the joy within.
Please join me in the spirit that some call prayer and others name meditation. Open yourself to the wonders and mysteries of the world. Open yourself to compassion and empathy. Take one breath. Take another. Center yourself. Today I offer a prayer for the peoples of Israel, Palestine, and all the peoples who live in conflict. O Spirit of life, that some of us name God and others call the highest within or the greatest without, be in the world today and move in the hearts of the peoples of the world. May all be inspired to remember that great truth: injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. What happens to you also happens to me. We are all bound together. Remembering this truth, may we be inspired to honor the peoples who live on the land and may we be inspired to place ourselves in solidarity with those who are marginalized and oppressed. For we must remember, there is only one human family. There cannot be human rights for one group, but not another. We can only have human rights together. Bringing these words, this intention into the world, may we inspire, which is to say, breathe into being more justice, more peace, more solidarity than currently exists. So that it might be so, I invite the congregation, absent in body, but present in spirit, to say Amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits heavy and light on our hearts. We lift up Rosita Kirkman, who had a serious medical event this week and is now under care in the hospital. We wish her a speedy recovery and a return to her assisted living facility. I invite you to bring to mind or say the name of those you wish to have held in the loving embrace of this community. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Pause in awe and wonder of the mystery that is life, the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion. I invite each of you to enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection.
This morning's offering will support Equality Texas. Equality Texas is an educational and advocacy organization that has stood up for the rights of LGBTQ Texans for over 40 years. Every legislative session, they are tirelessly focused on adding to and preserving the rights of vulnerable Texans. One of their top priorities this session has been to fight discriminatory anti-transgender legislation, especially those that targeted children and access to health care. One of their statewide education efforts is on promoting the visibility of Texas's transgender community. The work they do helps to move all Texans to a healthier future where LGBTQ Texans have the full protections of the law and equal access to all aspects of life. Our offering is weaving a tapestry of love and action. We invite you to give generously.
La lectura del día de hoy París, 1974, de Cristina Peri Rossi. Today's reading, Paris, 1974, by Cristina Peri Rossi. El hombre estaba tristón en medio del Boulevard Saint-Germain sin decidirse una dirección y otra. The man stood dismal in the middle of Boulevard Saint-Germain, unable to decide which direction to go. Estas calles son distintas a mis calles, pensó. Estas palabras son diferentes a mis palabras, pensó. These streets are different from my streets, he thought. These words are different from my words, he thought. ¿Dónde he venido a parar? Si mi abuelo lo supiera, si él me viera parado en Saint-Germain-des-Prés, sin hablar una jota de francés. What have I come to? If my grandfather knew, if he could see me standing on Saint-Germain-des-Prés, unable to speak one word of French. Perdido entre los metros, las estaciones, los bonos bus, si mi abuelo lo hubiera sabido. Lost amongst the metros, the stations, the buses, if my grandfather had known, he would have told all his friends. Soy el primero de la familia que pisó París. Lo habría contado a todos sus compañeros y todavía me hago famoso. I am the first in our family to set foot in Paris, and still I'll be famous there, back home. Pensó el 5 de noviembre de 1974, parado en el Boulevard de Saint-Germain, muerto de hambre y de frío, sin saber una jota de francés. He thought, standing on Boulevard Saint-Germain on November 5, 1974, dying of hunger and cold, unable to speak a word of French.
I want to begin today's sermon with a reflection on something that I never thought I would talk about during worship: my hair. You might have noticed that it has gotten rather long. In fact, it's now the longest it has ever been. I've not cut it since late February 2020. When the pandemic hit, I took the conservative approach to risk and avoided hair salons. My lady friend was not comfortable cutting my hair, and so my options became shave my head, make an ill-advised attempt to tame it with a pair of scissors and a mirror, or grow it out. At some point, a few months into the pandemic, I decided that as a personal, symbolic statement about taking public health seriously and honoring the collective and personal trauma that I and we have been experiencing, I would keep growing it until I was fully vaccinated. Well, that time has come. A few weeks ago, I received my second jab of Pfizer, and so sometime next week, while I'm on a staycation, I will go to a barber and get about 6 inches chopped off. I will also get my beard trimmed. I'm very much looking forward to that, having spent the last 15 months attempting to keep it lined up and my sideburns under control using an electric razor while watching myself in the looking glass. I anticipate it will be rather a cathartic experience, an instance where life feels like it's returning to something resembling what it was in the before times. It's entirely possible I might even get a little maudlin while I'm sitting in the barber's chair. I mentioned my hair and my impending haircut to invite you to consider the question, is there something that you have started to do again or that you are planning to start to do again now that life is beginning to return to something similar to what it once was? Is there some activity that symbolizes pre-pandemic life for you? Several of you have shared with me your lists of such activities. They include eating inside at your favorite restaurant, hugging your grandchildren, hugging your parents, flying on an airplane, or even riding on public transit. Whatever they are, activities like my upcoming trip to the barber's offer a starting point for my reflections on today's subject, humanism and the just life. Humanism is the 5th source of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, and we have been exploring it throughout the month. It can be variously defined and has been variously understood. This morning, in honor of the lecture that we'll be hosting next week, I want to focus on Anthony Pinn's definition of it. You might remember that Dr. Pinn is a seminal humanist theologian, a Unitarian Universalist, and a professor at Rice. He's also a longtime friend of the congregation and a friend of mine. Tony offers us a definition of non-theistic religious humanism, that is a variety of humanism that we can celebrate within the context of our communion and that does not require God to be religious, which runs, God has never been anything more than a symbol, an organizing framework for viewing and living life. For the humanist, he continues, this symbol has run its course and is no longer capable of doing the heavy lifting required for the contemporary world. This symbol has run its course. Tony wants us to think, to live religiously without having to resort to what he calls God talk. Instead of looking for transcendental symbols that fall outside of our lives for guidance, for inspiration, for a resource in trying to invoke Martin Luther King Jr., to try to make a way out of no way, we should look to what can be found within our ordinary lives, on this terrestrial sphere, amongst the stars above and amid the stardust below. This symbol has run its course. Humanism and the just life. In this sermon, I want to suggest to you that there are symbols to inspire us to pursue justice all around us. We need not turn to God for inspiration. We can turn to our ordinary experience, to our regular life, and to the regular lives of other humans for inspiration. In what remains of my sermon, I'm going to touch upon 2 things. First, I'll discuss the nature of symbols. What are they, and what do they do for us? Second, I will explore a few varieties of the just life that humanism can point us to. First, symbols. Unitarian Universalism is in many ways tied to the broader theological current often described as theological liberalism. The scholar Gary Dorian has defined this tradition as the idea that Christian theology can be genuinely Christian without being based upon external authority. It is a tradition that stretches back at least 3 centuries, and in the ensuing years has offered inspiration far beyond the bounds of historically Christian communities. Someone like Tony pushes its boundaries by arguing that theology can be both non-theistic and genuinely theological without being based upon an external or transcendental authority. Theology, like most other aspects of human culture, is a layered activity. It builds upon those who have gone before, who have spoken, who have written, who have created prior to any of our lives. One of the 20th century's great liberal theologians was the German exile Paul Tillich. I've spoken about him with some of you in the past. He was one of the most influential religious figures in this country in the mid-20th century, inspiring people like Martin Luther King Jr. and James Luther Adams. He argued that God was best understood as the ground of being and meaning. In his understanding, God is simply another way of saying the fount of blessing, the source of life, the point of inspiration that gives your life meaning. The Unitarian Universalist theologian Forrest Church famously described the situation this way: God is not God's name. God is our name for that which is greater than all and yet present in each. Symbols, Tillich taught, are a primary way we humans approach religious truth. They help us to understand how we are all bound up together. A symbol, he wrote in somewhat academic terms, has truth. It is adequate to the revelation it expresses. A symbol is true. It is the expression of a true revelation. Revelation in this context should be understood as the greater truth about our lives and the world that is sometimes hidden, but always present. It's those things that peek out, that pop up in times of crisis and ecstasy, which remind us of the reality that we are each part of something greater than ourselves. All star children comprised of dust from a long extinguished mother star. In this sense, a symbol is something that both suggests that which is true in the world and something that actually encapsulates the truth. Returning to the distinctly non-theistic symbol of my hair, it has for me represented a number of things about living through these times. Foremost amongst them has been the simple truth that this time is grossly different than almost anything any of us have previously experienced. In the before times, I wore my hair short. I went to the barber every 5 or 6 weeks. I had a particular routine which the pandemic completely disrupted. Growing my hair long has been an expression of my pandemic-inspired discomfort with being in close proximity to people from outside my household. Prior to being fully vaccinated, the idea of having someone close to my face, even if we were both wearing masks, made me uncomfortable. Nor was I alone in such unease. A December 2020 New York Times survey of 700 epidemiologists indicated that only 29% of them were comfortable with the idea of getting their hair cut. My long hair became a very personal human symbol for me. It represented my discomfort with my daily life in the midst of a pandemic. And it is an actual expression of the discomfort. It was the discomfort, it revealed the discomfort, and at the same time it pointed me to an even larger truth. We are all bound up together. The actions of one of us have the potential to impact all of us. My hair became for me an expression of a commitment to follow guidelines for best practices to slow the spread of the pandemic. It was a way for me to create a symbol that I was committed to the project of social solidarity at a time of collective calamity. Have you had or do you have a similar symbol? I anticipate that for many of you, your symbol of the pandemic has been the mask. And a symbol that more and more people are being vaccinated is that you are starting to throw your masks away. I used to wear my mask all the time. Now that I am vaccinated, I only wear it when I go to the store or enter a space where masks are required. This morning I had to remind myself to grab one on the way out of the house because I intend to visit the fishmonger after we're done recording. What are the symbols that are important to you? Since we are exploring humanism this month, I have intentionally chosen 2 symbols that are drawn from ordinary life and are distinctly this world: hair and face masks. From symbols, we move on to a discussion of the just life. Justice is a notoriously difficult term to define. The lawyer and civil libertarian Clarence Darrow once quipped, "There's no such thing as justice, in or out of court." The philosopher Martha Nussbaum is somewhat more helpful on the matter, describing justice as the means to human survival and flourishing. Such a view, I should note, is decidedly anthropocentric. It's centered on human life, a fact that Nussbaum herself acknowledges and is presently working to push beyond in work she's doing on non-human animals. Nonetheless, her definition of justice is helpful in our approach to a humanistic understanding of the just life. It is a definition that is grounded in our terrestrial existence, rather than something that requires us to look beyond our present world for inspiration on how we are to shape the just. A theistic definition, one that relies upon God, could be entirely unconcerned with human existence. Such a definition might argue that justice is following God's law, whether or not that law has any particular commitment to our survival or flourishing. The humanistic tradition fundamentally rejects such a position. Instead, humanists are only interested in the question of justice as it relates to existence here and now. They are only concerned with flourishing without reference to or reliance on God. Rather crudely put, there are two approaches that humanists take towards justice. The first approach is to argue that it is possible to improve the human condition. The second approach is to argue that such hope is unwarranted, that there is little to suggest that, as Martin Luther King Jr. would, building off Theodore Parker would have it, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Which do you hold? Do you believe that the world can be improved, or do you take the position that there is little reason to anticipate the emergence of justice? To some extent, I place myself in the first category. I do not think that things will automatically get better, but I do think it is possible for them to get better. To marshal support for such an argument, I would point again to the symbol of my hair. The pandemic is being brought into abeyance through human technology. The fact that almost 50% of the population of the United States has been at least partially vaccinated suggests that in this country we are moving into a situation where more justice, more human survival and flourishing is going to be possible than has been present for the past 15 months. Those who want to counter such a position need simply to point to the gross injustices in vaccine distribution. They just need to ask questions about why people who are not particularly vulnerable to COVID-induced mortality, young adults for instance, are being given a higher priority than medical workers in other parts of the world. Or they might ask questions about the enduring nature of the conflict in Israel-Palestine. Rather than expanding on that here, I invite you to watch the two forums we'll be posting in the coming week on the conflict. One is with the Palestinian scholar Shireen Sikely, and the other is with the editor of Jewish Currents, Nathan Goldman. The truth is that there is ample evidence to support both humanist positions. I can think of 100 examples to suggest that the world can and has gotten better, and I can think of 100 counterexamples. Human lifespan has increased throughout much of the last 100 years. Human lifespan has decreased for many groups in the United States over the last decade. It's possible to have a society where democratic self-governance is held as central to the social project. The Republican Party is mounting what appears to be a successful and sustained assault on access to the ballot box. I suspect that the best position to take is one that blends the two approaches. Such a position would challenge us to act in such a way that we acknowledge the possibility that our actions have the potential to bring more justice in the world. But it would also understand that justice is not assured. Here I find myself thinking of our reading, a poem of exile written at a time and a place when it must have felt that there was little justice in the world. The poet, Cristina Rossi, was forced from Uruguay in the early 1970s and continues to live outside her native country. She offers us many rich texts that invite us to imagine the difficulty of living as a refugee. The man in her poem is totally alienated from the world around him. He is cold. He is hungry. He does not speak the language in the city where he now lives. And yet, there is a hint within the poem that suggests that there is some possibility that his life, his survival and sense of flourishing might get a bit better. He is alive, and there is part of him that can appreciate the beauty of Paris and maybe, just maybe, start to build a new life for himself. It will not be the life he once had. It will be something else. And here I return, somewhat cheekily, to the symbol of my hair. Cutting it represents a return to something that resembled life during the before times. I'm planning a trip to New Orleans in June and recently ate inside a restaurant for the first time since February 2020. However, getting my haircut does not assure me that I will not live through another pandemic. Nor does it even mean that COVID has been entirely defeated. It simply signifies that for some people it is possible to live more safely. Others are still waiting to get the vaccine. We might find ourselves in another pandemic due to virus mutations or the emergence of an entirely new virus. But for now, I can cut my hair. And I can ask you, what symbols represent for you something significant about life returning to the way it once was? Which approach to justice do you take? That things might get better? That they will? That they cannot? These are not my questions to answer. They are yours. And so I close with the simple desire that you will answer them as wisely as you can. Amen, and blessed be.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Let us go in the spirit of love, aware of the unfolding beauty around us and the spark within each of us. Go in peace, go in love. May our lives be a blessing. Amen.
We honor our graduating seniors today. They are graduating from our youth group. We have photos and a bit of information. They each shared with us about their experiences being involved in the church and about their plans for the near future. We wish each of them the very best on their journeys. We will continue to be available to them through our online younger young adult group, as well as any of the adult groups they wish to join. And when in Houston, we hope they will come to visit us on a Sunday morning and again feel the warmth of our beloved community, warmth we each take with us to live out our daily lives. Please join me in thanking those who are involved in our service today. Our Membership and Communications Coordinator, Alma Vizcarra, our Music Director, Mark Vogel, who was joined by the Sanctuary Choir, as well as guest jazz musicians, Dalton Lee and David Craig. For those of you who are new to this congregation or the online services, let me tell you a few words about Unitarian Universalism. Unitarian Universalism is a faith where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your expansive heart. As Unitarian Universalists, we join together on a journey that honors everywhere we've been before. Together, we create a force more powerful than one person or one belief system. Our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. Rather than a creed, we share a covenant based on a set of 7 principles. These include the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the knowledge that we are part of an interconnected web of all existence that calls us to honor the earth and all creatures, and the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Thank you for being with us today.
There are many groups meeting online. Please go to firstuuhouston.org to check them all out. Here are a few of the highlights. After the service, we have 2 opportunities to chat, the coffee half hour at 11:30 and the discussion circle at noon. In the latter, Pam will be asking, how do we know what we know? The Climate Action Team will meet today at 12:30 p.m. and the BIPOC gathering will meet today at 4. Texts for Troubled Times will be wrapping up Part 2 of Yak Yassi's Homegoing this Tuesday at 5 p.m. Their June selection will be Braiding Sweet Grass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Join those asking, who was Jesus and why did he have such a profound effect on the world? The UU Bible study of the Gospels is Wednesday at 7. Or drop by the board chat happening at the same time to discuss highlights of the most recent board meeting in an informal setting. Young adults have a great place for support, sharing, and conversation Friday at 3. Many of the topics for upcoming discussion groups are on our website, firstuu.org/online-group-meetings. Visit there for more details and to sign up. And remember, all times shown are Central Daylight Time.